What's up guys, Vulkan here, and today we're checking out a new mobile action RPG called Raziel. Now, this game reminds me a lot of Diablo Immortal with its combat, classes, and aesthetic. So, you guys know I don't really review mobile games, but when the devs at Intrasoft reached out to me and asked if I was interested in playing their game and doing a sponsored video, I watched a few trailers and decided to give it a shot because it looked like a more complete game than other mobile titles that I've tried out. And if you're interested in learning more, you can click on the link in the description and it'll take you to check the game. So, after getting about 10 hours of playtime under my belt, I want to talk to you guys about my first impressions and let you decide if this game is worth your time. So first off, Raziel is a hack and slash action RPG on your phone, and I have a Pixel 3 XL. It plays smoothly on my device. So if you're looking for something that meets that base criteria, then kind of stick with me here. If you're someone who likes to play emulators on PC, you can also play Raziel there, and from what I've seen, it actually plays pretty well. So when you first start, Raziel has you pick from 4 classes, but there are 6 classes in total that you can acquire. You have the Death Ranger, the Ice Mage, the Beastmaster, which is a Barbarian class. You have the Puppeteer, which is a Summoner, the Paladin, and the Fire Elf. I picked up the Death Ranger and played that one all the way through the story and into endgame. And for the majority of the experience, the combat was about the same. I had my basic attack that I would use as a filler, and then I would use a skill when I needed to. Most of the time, my basic attacks were enough to take care of the smaller enemies, and the skills were only used when I ran into like an elite or a mini boss that had some modifiers that made things a little bit tougher. And because my basic attack and my skills basically blew through everything, it made the early game go by pretty fast. So the first few chapters really kind of flew by, which most of the time those are tutorials anyway, so it really wasn't that big of a surprise. But around Act 5 is when the difficulty cranked up a little bit, and that was a nice change of pace. So the cool thing here is you can actually swap between any of these heroes as long as you have them unlocked. So you can play your Death Ranger for a little bit, then flip to Beastmaster to work on his gear, then flip over to the Paladin. So having multiple classes is what keeps the gameplay fresh without too much effort, and this was something I really liked. I could switch between different playstyles to kind of fit whatever I was feeling. If I wanted to jump around and smash things, I would play the Beastmaster. If I wanted to stick back and do some ranged things, I could play the Death Ranger, or I could play the Fire Elf, or I could play the Ice Mage. So there was enough diversity there to keep me playing and logging in and all that fun stuff. So as you're playing through all 50 missions, you're going to see some different themed zones and fight different enemies, which is nice. Variety is always good. It seems like action RPGs don't focus heavily enough on variety. Now, the zone sizes are medium. They're okay for something on your phone. I feel like these are larger than you would typically see for a phone game. But I did run into a lot of hallway room designed maps a few hours into the game, which took away from some of the fun exploration that you see in earlier missions. When you're exploring different fields, you're exploring kind of the outskirts of town, and I feel like those zones were more like a giant circle, which encouraged a lot more exploration, and you ran into enemies, you ran into mini bosses, and I feel like that was just a better design. So this is a design decision that plagues games across a lot of genres in the industry. Players being funneled into hallways, which lead into rooms full of enemies, only to be funneled into another hallway. Rinse, repeat, forever. So hopefully future maps can embrace more of an open feel. I feel like that type of design will bode well for an action RPG to give a little bit more sense of mystery, a little more sense of exploration for players. I know I really enjoy that, and I think other players would too. Now, between missions, you're going to be bouncing back to the city, which has vendors, other players, and it gives it more of like an MMO feel. So you can visit the tavern, pick up some specialized quests, but I didn't spend too much time in the city because a lot of those vendors, those gameplay systems, are locked until after you've completed the campaign and completed a few runs into the endgame mode, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So as you go through and you play through the campaign, you're going to have all these different missions, and each mission is going to reward you with gear, currency, experience, and materials. Now, the currency and materials are used for upgrading skills and items, which we'll talk about in a second, but I do want to tackle gear first. That's usually a more exciting topic. So gear in Raziel follows the typical action RPG traditions to a T. You have a variety of flavors. You have common, uncommon, rare, legendary, and gear sets. And all of these pieces come with randomly rolled affixes, while legendary and set gear come with specific effects that you can build around. Now, these pieces need to be identified using golden materials before you can use them. And this is kind of where the grind starts to come into play. because you have to decompose legendary or set gear to get the materials needed to identify legendary and set gear. So it's a cycle, right? You get into the self-sustaining cycle of finding gear to break down to identify the same rarity of gear that you want. Now, the nice thing is, because this is a mobile game, and typically these games are pay to win or they have some sort of cash shop incentive, the nice thing is you can go play the game, find those legendaries, those set pieces, break them down, and identify new legendaries and set pieces without having to visit a shop, a mall, some sort of gameplay system, some sort of gimmick in order to build those materials back up. Now, the other nice thing here is that legendary gear starts dropping super early. So you're going to have a huge heap of materials to use when you hit endgame, which you're going to need because there's going to be a lot of things to identify. Now, when I say early, I'm talking like level 4 and 5 when I got my first legendary, and then I probably saw one every other mission from there on out, which kind of ruins the fun a little bit because they became so common. I actually saw less uncommon and common gear than I did legendaries, and that was a little kind of jarring for me at first. You figured you'd want more junk gear than actual quality gear, but I understand where they're going. You have so much gear in the game, you need to have legendaries to chew through and burn through so you can identify other legendaries. If you have a self-sustaining system, you have to be able to sustain that self-sustaining system and give players what they need. So the legendary and gear set effects were actually pretty cool, and they were pretty impactful for gameplay. You have things like being able to create a poison aura that deals damage to everything around you, and you can build around this as a Death Ranger, which is what I did. I went all into Toxic, which we'll talk about, and most of the time these legendary and gear sets actually give you another skill to use. So it's not just like a passive ability or an on-hit trigger, it's something that you can work into your rotation, which helps diversify your toolkit. So that was something that was really surprising to see, especially for a mobile game. Now, one downside to gear in Raziel is it doesn't change your appearance much. And I know this isn't the end of the world for most people, but I really like to see my character start off with rags and end up in this badass ornate armor that I earned, and it just looks good. You can be proud of that character. And instead, you're just going to see gear change colors. Now, legendaries and gear sets do have their own look, and because they're so detailed, they really kind of pop off on your character, and you can tell immediately that's a legendary piece of gear. That is a gear set piece of gear, which is cool because it allows you to see other people in the city and go, okay, what does that person have? He looks really badass. But if you want actual appearance changes, then that's something to consider when you're looking at downloading Raziel. And besides gear, the other way you can customize your character is through their skills and skill tree. Now, each hero starts with 4 skills and a passive ability, and as you level up, you're going to unlock 8 new skills that you can build around. And these aren't just variants. It's not like instead of shooting a normal arrow, it's a poison arrow. It's like instead of shooting a multi-shot, now I'm shooting a cascading shot that it's toxic. Or now instead of shooting a cascading toxic shot, now I'm going to throw out a bolo that's going to capture a bunch of things and pin them down for some CC. So there is a variety of things you can choose from and build around to kind of make your character fit into what you're looking for. So that's the skills. Now, the skill tree is where things start to become way more diverse from player to player. The tree in Raziel feels extremely similar to Path of Exile. You have a vast number of nodes, you have passive stat increases, you have skill augments, you have things like the node for shadow hunting. Each time you use poison shadow hunting, your damage is dealt twice. Or after you land a normal attack or use a skill, you surround yourself in a toxic mist dealing AoE damage that, by the way, stacks with that legendary dealing a toxic AoE, so you can stack up auras like crazy in this game. And the cool thing about this tree is that you can save builds if you want to. So if you're playing the Death Ranger and you want to specialize in traps on one tree and toxic damage on another, you can easily swap between those two by saving them independently. So after you beat the story, you got some gear, you hit the level cap, everything's great, chalk. The rest of the game revolves around Demon Land, which is not a fun amusement park despite its name, but rather a series of floors that you have to clear and ascend through. And the in-game activity itself isn't bad. It's fun, you know, it's something like Greater Rifts from Diablo. You can farm for loot, you can go out there and just kind of have a good time. So it's not anything groundbreaking, but it's enjoyable and it fills the gap. But I have 2 problems with Demon Land that I really want the developers to look at. One It's locked behind a currency called crystal balls, and you have to use these crystal balls to purchase and attempt at clearing a floor. So think of it like a ticket for riding a ride at an amusement park called Demon Land. You grab the ticket, you go to Demon Land, you pay them the ticket, you go out there, you fail, you didn't enjoy the ride, you lost your ticket, you get kicked out, grab another ticket and try again. And this is where the mobile side of things comes into play heavily, because that currency can be acquired through daily logins, bought with in-game currency that you earn when you level up, or bought with real money. So the problem here is that once you're out of crystal balls, you either spend real money or grind the same story missions over and over to gain them as a reward when you have a level up. And this leads to problem number 2, and one that surrounds vendors in the town hub being locked behind thresholds tied to Demon Land. So you can't even experience or use some of the game systems until you reach a certain milestone in the end game activity, which just feels bad. You go from vendor to vendor and they're like, I can't talk to you until you progress in Demon Land. And I go Demon Land and they're like, sorry, you're under the power cap, or you don't have currency in order to, kind of progress. So I'm stuck, and that's a problem. So you hit the level cap, you try to talk to the vendor, they say, nope, not going to talk to you. You got a crystal balls, and really the only thing you can do is either go play campaign missions over and over and over again in order to get some, or log out for the day and hope your next daily login gives you more crystal balls so you can try to progress in Demon Land, which then unlocks more stuff to do. So keeping the mobile theme in mind, I would really like to see them create a free, lesser in-game activity that rewards crystal balls at certain thresholds, and these can be used to keep progressing the game. This way, players have an activity that keeps them playing, and the devs have a chance at someone spending more money in the cash shop because people are able to continue playing their game. Really, the situation they're in right now is kind of a lose-lose, where they can't get into Demon Land, so I'm going to close the app on my phone or uninstall it. The devs lose out on potential sales, and the players lose out on a potentially fun time. So let's talk about the cash shop a little bit. Now, luckily, you can't buy gear in the cash shop. You only have cosmetics, you have pets, wings, obviously the in-game currency, but you will see pop-ups every time you log in showing sales, discounts, buy this, buy that, here's new pets, here's new wings. Click out of them, click on the X. It's not a huge deal. I'm used to it by this point, but it is something that you're going to encounter. So let's talk about my overall experience with Raziel. It was a fun time. I did have a good time with the game. I enjoyed leveling up my ranger, unlocking new skills, see how they worked with my build, putting together my toxic ranger build, which was pretty cool, assigning all of those skill points, finding new gear, trying out all the different classes. So there was a lot to do from 1 to level cap. When I got to level cap, that's where I kind of ran into issues. Once I overcame that big obstacle and got more into endgame, that was fun. I really just wish I could do that more often. And I do think there is enough here to justify some space on your phone if you're looking for an action RPG to take with you. But please go into this understanding this is still a mobile game. This is still a mobile action RPG that is free. There will be things that they will try to push on you to buy, and just understand that going into it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is something, that's how they make money. That's how they develop the game. So keep that in mind. Now, there are some things they also need to work on with in-game. We talked about those. The crystal ball currency, the lockout, the vendor systems. I think all the vendor systems just need to be unlocked, because there's just no point in keeping them locked. I mean, they're not mysterious. Really, it's just a more frustrating experience than anything. So hopefully they'll take my advice. Hopefully they'll hear it and come up with something there, because I do think there is a lot of good stuff in here, and this is the closest thing we have to Diablo Immortal so far. And if you want to learn more about the game or try it for yourself, you can check the link in the description below. And if you've played Raziel, drop a comment below. Let's talk about it. I'm curious what everybody's experience is with this game if they've played it. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate the support. This is Vulkan, and I'll talk to you guys next time.